hiding in plain sight.
Dodson! We've got Dodson here! Nobody cares.
A brilliant reprieve from that much ballyhooed eyesore.
Welcome to
the dynamic island.
That little brilliant bit of notch of flage is one of the smallest details that's had a huge impact on this year's iPhone lineup. But there are new cameras to talk about, front and back, and a display that's much, much brighter, even when it's dimmer. And Apple is going where no man has gone before to save your soul. My dynamic review of the iPhone 14 Pro Max with some insights for iPhone 14 Pro as well. Camera samples, high-res audio tested, video samples, all the things. Let's get into it. Some people tend to notice newer, older iPhones by the different camera modules and previously the Touch ID chin. Some of that has changed, obviously, and some things look the same from a distance at first glance. But you take a closer look and these larger camera modules and that hidden eye-shaped hole punch cameras are some weighty updates, even over last year's gear. We'll examine that in detail in a moment. This year, Apple switches to eSIM only for its iPhone sold in the US. That means they've ditched the physical SIM slots in favor of 2 digital eSIM slots internally. The pros and cons of that are a video in and of itself, but for me, when switching from the 13 Pro Max to this 14 Pro Max, I couldn't use iPhone's built-in switch tool, which is supposed to make this painless going from iPhone to iPhone. T-Mobile doesn't support that. So I had to call them direct and have them provision this 14 Pro Max. But other than having to call a human being and sit on hold, it was actually quite painless. What other internal changes does Apple have for you this year? Let's start with what is enabling this year's new gear. Apple updated the internals in one way or another across all iPhones this year, but the Pro models are the ones which received an entirely new processor in the A16 Bionic. Without getting too deep in the weeds and numbers you may or may not care about, this year's A16 has 50% more memory bandwidth than before, which translates into performance gains across processes, but specifically graphics performance and computational photography. There's also a new display engine which enables a 1 Hz refresh rate, which is an important element for the new always-on display, higher peak brightness, a new proximity sensor, which also is important for that always-on display. Apple also added a new image signal processor to support their new camera hardware. What does all of that mean in real life? Well, I'm going to do something I don't usually do, and that is begin with the cameras because, frankly, that was the first impactful thing I noticed when I began playing with the phone and comparing it to last year's model. The iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max have the same camera systems, which now feature a larger sensor on the main, better sensors across the board, and the new photonic engine, which utilizes deep fusion to take multiple images pixel by pixel, applies Silicon Valley witchcraft, and gives you the best images possible under challenging lighting conditions. And, of course, you're saying, that sounds lovely, but I still don't know what all of that means. And that means that when I come to the Metro stop to do those night photo comparisons, that the images from the iPhone 14 Pro Max should look better, should look crispier, better contrast than the images from the iPhone 13 Pro Max. Now, just in case you're wondering, this video is being shot on the both phones from the ultra-wide lens. So you might get an idea already of what that video or what those still images are going to look like when you see them as I compare the 3 different cameras. So let's do that. Let's get to those photos. As I alluded to, the most striking difference is with the ultra-wide and the 3x telephoto shots. There's also a new 2x telephoto, which utilizes the larger main sensor's output to give you great detail on a cropped image that gives you 2x magnification on your images without deteriorating the image or blowing up pixels, doing different things that ultimately lead to a less than ideal image. 2x is great here. There is a difference in the main cameras though with the iPhone 14 Pro Max and iPhone 13 Pro Max, as you can see here, but the new sensor in the ultra wide that is almost twice the size of last year's ultra wide smashes last year's night photos. The clarity, detail, and exposure are much improved. Even in the videos I shot, the iPhone 14 Pro Max's ultra wide low light video was sharper, had better black levels and less noise. Previously, I would avoid shooting in low light with the iPhone's ultra wide, but the 14 Pro's camera system definitely allows for it to be a consideration going forward. And speaking of moving forward, I had to get pretty close to these ants to get a decent shot, and I'm surprised I even got this one. Macro is hard enough as it is without ultra tiny creepy crawlies moving around. But the ultra wide with its new gear takes even better macros than before. And if you watch my reviews, you know I love playing with macro photography. The level of detail in these macros is beautiful, along with the color rendering. Same goes for the texture and color in these ripped jeans. And back to the main lens. With a larger sensor comes greater detail, so a true test of these cameras and photonic engine is always going to be my beard and portrait mode. Many of you have expressed your appreciation for these wizard whiskers in the comments of our reviews, but cameras don't find them magical at all. Not the case here. Edge detection and my furry face are fast friends with photonic engine and iPhone 14 Pro's ISP and improved camera hardware. You can see it even more as I use a new iOS trick to separate me and my beard from the background and paste it into a document. But these new cameras have other tricks. Cinematic mode now supports 4K at 24 and 30 frames per second, and I'm going to reiterate again this year that this is not just video portrait mode. If it's just you in the video, it is, but at a second person and Apple's neural engine and AI, and you get...
So what's this I hear about the Little Mermaid?
They actually picked a peach or pink person to play a purple octopus. Clearly this is too woke.
All right.
Yes, you get artificially intelligent focus pooling. When the camera shifted focus from me to my son and back, we didn't have a third person doing that. The iPhone 14 Pro Max did that on its own. Apple called this out when they debuted the feature in the iPhone 13 Pro, but people still seem to be focused, no pun intended, on the portrait mode aspect when cinematic mode is so much more powerful than that. We have the iPhone 14 Pro Max with that improved OIS shift and the new action mode. So I'm gonna go for a frolic here in the park because black men frolic, we do. And my son here, who's giggling behind the camera, is going to follow me as I frolic. Are you ready?
Yeah.
We're gonna see how action cam mode works while I frolic. And here we go.
Okay. Have to go back or...
How shaky was or wasn't that? That's action mode, iPhone 14 Pro Max. Now, a very quick explanation of why and how this is important. With the larger sensor and the ability to record in 2.8K at 24 and 30 frames per second, the difference between Apple's iPhone 14 Pro extreme video stabilization and other smartphone manufacturers' super video stabilization is that having a higher resolution video allows for this smoother, crispier video. This is what's happening. With other manufacturers that are shooting at a lower resolution, often 1080p or full HD as they refer to it, you have less information and a smaller frame size to work with. And what it does, what the algorithms essentially do is kind of blow up the center and reposition the video. It kind of figures out where the video should be on the horizon and tries to make it as straight as possible so it doesn't look like it's bouncing. But when you have less frame to work with and less digital information, you're going to have video that deteriorates. Where the iPhone 14 Pro Max, you're working with a larger frame so that when you're cropping in, you're actually not deteriorating the video like you would with the lower resolution. And because it's 2.8K, you're working with more pixels, you're working with more digital information, more data. So you're, again, not deteriorating the video as much. So that's kind of what's going on. And that is totally a kind of explanation for principle and to kind of get the idea, and not the white paper technical explanation for those of you super nerds out there who just heard me give that spiel. Now, the front-facing camera has some new tricks as well. This new true depth camera now supports autofocus and has a faster aperture, which gives you sharper images in varying conditions. The low light images I've captured are pretty solid. Here's a night mode image in a room where I actually had all of the overhead lights turned off. One feature of the new True Depth module that I definitely don't take for granted is that you can now unlock your phone using Face ID while your phone is in landscape orientation. No more of this. And since we're talking True Depth, this is a good time to talk about what else is on the front of the phone. Probably the smallest big feature announced this year, Dynamic Island. Every other manufacturer is yelling at their dev team and asking, why didn't you think of this? For years now, I've seen people complaining about these camera notches. They weren't a huge bother to me, but apparently to many, they were an eyesore. So as Apple moved away from the bathtub notch and was moving toward these pill-shaped hole punch cameras, some genius had the idea to hide the ugly in plain sight using a new software hook which turns the alleged eyesore into a hub for notifications, alerts, quick access to info from running apps, and another way to multitask. Works like this. Say I have music running. I'm a newly converted Beyonce fan, so Renaissance is my jam. Energy with famous Jamaican iconoclast Grace Jones is playing up here in the island. I can tap and hold to bring up a mini player similar to what you'd see on the lock screen, and I might have some curry simmering on the stove, so I'm gonna start a timer. Now, there was only music there before, but minimizing the timer, I now have both up top, easily identifiable in their own islands. So, is it really a dynamic island chain? QT&A. And now, I can tap and hold and access each app, switching between them, all right from the island or islands. Later this year, live activities will be added for things like rideshare status updates, sports scores, and food orders. It really is a neat little quality of life feature which bounces and breathes as it displays info and as you interact with it, and I can't wait to see what else can be done with it as more developers and apps take advantage of it. Now, right under that, or below it, is the display. It's still OLED HDR, but this year it's brighter, up to 1600 nits, which is the same as the Pro Display XDR, but it'll go even brighter than that outdoors, maxing out to 2000 nits. The iPhone was already one of two of my favorite outdoor displays, but at this brightness, living in sunny Southern California, it's that much better. And this year's brighter display also now has an always-on mode. It's beautiful in its transitioning from the on state to the dim state, and then from there to the unlocked state. As you can see in this version I have here with my wife and I as my lock screen, the skin tones and colors are still visible even when dimmed. Here's another with my valiant fur beast. Look at those dimmed eyes. Look at those dimmed eyes. Now that the display supports the 1 Hz refresh rates this year, the idea here is to give you all the info at a glance, even when the screen is off, and it's all handled by a new power efficiency display coprocessor. I need more time, but in my week with the phone so far, I do think the battery takes a hit with always on activated. I'm gonna need more time playing with it deactivated to come to a definite conclusion, but my 13 Pro Max I've been using felt like it had a bit more stamina. That said, I've still been getting long days out of the phone, even though I've been hammering it hard. 18 hours off the charger with roughly 6 hours screen on time, with Apple Music streaming on my commutes, phone calls, obsessive social media checking, busy days with email exchanges and text messaging, connection to an Apple Watch Series 8, and a constant glucose monitor. I'm a cyborg. And being in an area with bad signal where my phone's on T-Mobile, and even when I've tried them on Verizon, lose signal strength intermittently throughout the day, which is a definite drag on the battery. And there was some gaming thrown into the mix. Playing my go-to side-scroller, Streets of Rage 4, for 30 minutes, I experienced 12% battery drain and an 11-degree increase in temperature. But I'm not really worried about battery life because the phone charges over wire up to around 50% from near dead in about 30 minutes. Using third-party apps, I clocked the charge rate at approximately 13 watts using a couple different high-wattage chargers I have around here. A GAN charger from Aukey and a 100-watt PD Atom from Anker. Safety is big this year. Though I haven't been able to test this out, crash detection and emergency SOS have been added to the mix. Crash detection uses all of these leveled up sensors and bionics to detect high G-force crashes, so your phone won't activate, say, if you love tap the fender of the car in front of you. But if, God forbid, you're in a severe accident that has enough force that your airbags deploy, these iPhone 14s can automatically call emergency services and will play a voice loop notifying the operator of a crash and provide location. The phone will then also notify your emergency contacts you set up in the Health app with a text message and your location. Apple trained its AI to detect these severe crashes using real-world crash data for passenger vehicles like sedans and SUVs. So if you're in a motorcycle crash, or my personal fear, an airplane, this feature may or may not work. Let's not find out. Then there's the satellite-based emergency SOS. If you're off the grid with no cellular or Wi-Fi access and have an emergency, your phone will literally point you to the right satellites to connect with an Apple-trained representative and get help. This will be available in November, free for the first 2 years with no info yet on what this will look like after that. Yet another feature I don't want to have occasion to stress test. Overall, I think this is one of the best upgrade years since the iPhone X. If someone is a tech enthusiast and just wants the latest and greatest, the best smartphone Cupertino has to offer and asks me if they should upgrade from the iPhone 13 Pro Max, I'd say, do it! Do it now! I don't say that with many phones year over year. As a matter of fact, I rarely do. Usually it's, hey, if you're coming from a device a few years old, make it happen, Captain. Look, a lot of what's on these devices will come to your older devices if you haven't already updated to iOS 16. And the notchaflage, that is the dynamic island, awesome as it is, isn't a reason solely to upgrade. But the big improvements in camera hardware, for some, may be compelling enough reason to consider it, along with having an aging phone, of course. So, yes, I'd actually recommend this upgrade this cycle, even if you have an iPhone 13 Pro Max and the disposable income. Don't go into debt for it. The cameras are better. The video is better. Dynamic Island is hella fun. Shout out to my Oakland fam. And I no longer have to break my neck to log into my phone or any other software if my phone is sitting on its side. And though dongle land is required to listen to high-res music with my planar headphones, I get bit-perfect FLAC files out of the Lightning port without the need to use third-party software. Dope stuff. First world quality of life stuff. But solid, well thought out, actually upgrade worthy stuff.
Our most innovative Pro lineup yet.
Indeed it is, Tim. Indeed it is. Hey, I'm Tshaka Armstrong for iMore. If there's any questions about the iPhone 14 Pro Max or the iPhone 14 Pro that I did not answer in this video, considering it was mostly covering the iPhone 14 Pro Max, but go ahead and hit me with both because I have both. Go ahead and leave those comments in the comments section below, those questions, comments, rants, nerd rage. Go ahead, leave it all there. And I'll get to it. Love chatting with you all. I'm Tshaka Armstrong. I think I'm repeating myself. I already said that. But I will catch you on the next video.